Introductory Statement. Origins of the Book of Mormon, Back to the Future. After the publication of the Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, and Oliver Cowdery presented a faith-based explanation of its origin. 4 years later, an evidence-based explanation emerged in E.D. Howe's book, Mormonism Unveiled. Modern scholars have exposed flaws in the evidence in Howe's book. Most have rejected the theory that Sidney Rigdon reworked an unpublished Solomon Spaulding manuscript and shaped it into the Book of Mormon. And modern scholars have also favored Joseph Smith, not Sidney Rigdon, as the author of the Book of Mormon. Our academic journey will take us back to the future. We will attempt to re-establish an evidence-based case for the Spaulding-Rigdon authorship of the Book of Mormon. Now, here are the big three, the founding triumvirate of the Mormon faith: Joseph Smith, Sidney Rigdon, and Oliver Cowdery. At this juncture, it is time to consider the founding triumvirate of the Mormon faith: Joseph Smith, the treasure seeker, who dug up golden plates and gained the title of prophet; Sidney Rigdon, the theologian, who reworked Solomon Spaulding's manuscript found into the Book of Mormon; and Oliver Cowdery, who made minor contributions to Rigdon's work. A brief personality profile for each of these men follows. Meet Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was controversial. At an early age, he hired out as a common laborer who, among other things, dug wells. He found a seer stone and used it to guide him in seeking hidden treasure. Joseph made a living using his magic seer stone. He led gullible people to hidden treasure that was never there. In 1826, he was arrested for activities connected with treasure hunting and being a disorderly person. In his lifetime, he was charged with about 30 crimes and an equal amount of civil infractions. He was arrested over 35 times and escaped his ordered execution in Missouri only because the commanding officer refused to carry out his orders. At age 25, he claimed to have unearthed golden plates engraved with the history of the resurrected Jesus Christ in America. At age 25, he also claimed to have received divine gifts and special tools to translate the Reformed Egyptian on the golden plates. His relatives, the Whitmer family, and Martin Harris, the man who financed Joseph Smith, were allowed to see the golden plates and bear witness that they were real. At age 25, he presented his translation from the golden plates to the whole world as the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith also claimed to have received personal visits from heavenly messengers who commissioned him to restore the authentic New Testament church and its priesthood authority. His work in building that church commenced with the publication of the Book of Mormon. The church grew rapidly and has continued to expand to this day. Like the prophets of the Old Testament, Joseph Smith practiced polygamy. He claimed that he was commanded to do so. The Mormon Church agrees that he married about 40 women. Some were as young as 14, and some were other men's wives. He denied publicly that he was a polygamist, and when fellow Mormons accused him in print, he destroyed their newspaper. He founded Nauvoo, the most populous city in Illinois, serving as its mayor and self-appointed commander of the Nauvoo Legion, a militia 1/3 the size of the U.S. Army. But Joseph Smith never became a well-established public figure. The picture of Smith on the left emerged about 2 years ago. If it is truly Joseph Smith, it is the only photograph of him in existence. Joseph Smith was an outlier, and with all due respect to Fawn McKay Brody and the scholars who followed her, Joseph Smith was simply not capable of writing the Book of Mormon. And here is the second member of the founding triumvirate. Meet Sidney Rigdon. According to his son, John M. Rigdon, young Sidney borrowed all the histories he could get, and he became a great historian. Reading books was his greatest pleasure, and he became a biblical scholar in the process. Rigdon was also widely known as a precise grammarian. But here is another side of young Sidney. According to Dr. Lomi Rigdon, a physician and brother to Sidney Rigdon, as a young boy, Sidney was thrown from a horse. His feet were entangled in a stirrup, and he was dragged some distance before he was rescued. In this accident, he received some concussion to the brain that ever afterward seriously affected his character and in some respect his conduct. Dr. Lomi claimed that he still manifested great mental activity and power, but was to an equal degree inclined to run into wild visionary views on almost every question. Smith and Rigdon were tarred and feathered by a mob at the John Johnson farm on March 24, 1832. Joseph Smith recorded, quote, "The next morning I went to see Elder Rigdon and found him crazy and his head highly inflamed, for they had dragged him by his heels, and those two so high from the earth he could not raise his head from the rough frozen surface, which lacerated it exceedingly. And when he saw me, he called to his wife to bring him his razor. She asked him what he wanted of it, and he replied, 'To kill me.' Sister Rigdon then left the room, and he asked me to bring his razor. I asked him what he wanted of it, and he replied he wanted to kill his wife, and he continued delirious some days." In his master's thesis, titled Sidney Rigdon, Early Mormon, Darrell Chase tells us that Rigdon received permanent brain damage from his childhood accident, causing a fit of insanity in 1832. And in 1838, while imprisoned in Missouri, Rigdon developed a high fever and with it came another period of insanity for days thereafter. But Sidney Rigdon was a gifted writer and speaker. He was recommended by Alexander Campbell to be minister of the First Baptist Church of Pittsburgh. He developed a large and devoted congregation while serving simultaneously as a journeyman printer at the Patterson and Lambden publishing firm. Next, he preached successfully across several counties in northeastern Ohio. He began collaborating with Joseph Smith in the period 1827 to 1830, while presiding over a large congregation in Kirtland, Ohio. Meet Oliver Cowdery. Oliver Cowdery was a distant relative of Joseph Smith through marriage. He was also very close to Joseph at an early age. Between 1829 and 1836, Oliver Cowdery was the very first baptized Mormon. He bore witness with two others that he had seen the golden plates. He was one of the original 12 apostles and was designated assistant president of the church. Cowdery had claimed to be one of Joseph Smith's scribes who recorded Smith's dictation of the Book of Mormon. It was more likely that as a learned advocate of the restored gospel, he collaborated with Smith and Rigdon to write parts of the Book of Mormon. The source material for Cowdery's written contribution would be Ethan Allen's View of the Hebrews, a book that he was very familiar with. Cowdery was excommunicated for adultery in 1838. So in the years 1838 to 1848, Cowdery became a Methodist, taught school, practiced law, and dabbled in politics. In 1848, he was rebaptized Mormon, but was not able to participate in the church that had since moved to present-day Utah. Solomon Spaulding and Sidney Rigdon created the Book of Mormon, the Spaulding-Rigdon theory. This theory was established soon after the publication of the Book of Mormon, but beginning with Fawn Mackay Brody, most scholars have attributed authorship of the Book of Mormon to Joseph Smith. As stated previously, our academic journey will be back to the future, and our task will be to present a compelling case for the original Spaulding-Rigdon theory of the origin of the Book of Mormon. Samuel Spaulding and others signed affidavits in 1833. Samuel Spaulding, brother of Solomon Spaulding, and 7 other residents of Ohio signed affidavits affirming that around 1812, Solomon Spaulding wrote a manuscript with a plot similar to the Book of Mormon. It told of an ancient record buried in the earth. The record claimed that American Indians were descendants of the Jews, or the lost tribes of Israel. The manuscript was written in scriptural style, with the repeated phrases of, "and it came to pass," and "I, Nephi." The record of these affidavits is found in E.D. Howe's book, Mormonism Unveiled, published in 1834. Years later, Solomon Spaulding's widow and daughter and other residents of Ohio and residents of Amity, Pennsylvania, also signed statements indicating that Spaulding had authored a manuscript that was similar to the Book of Mormon. In 1832, Mormon missionaries Samuel H. Smith and Orson Hyde were challenged by Nehemiah King, an Ohio resident who knew Solomon Spaulding. King told them that their message resembled the Spaulding manuscript. Manuscript Found. Manuscript Found is a working title that was assigned to the Spaulding manuscript we have been covering. Manuscript Found is distinct and separate from the Solomon Spaulding document at Oberlin College and the published title of Manuscript Found by the Mormon Church. Solomon Spaulding submitted Manuscript Found to Patterson and Lambden Publishers in Pittsburgh. It was not immediately published, and Solomon Spaulding passed away in 1816. The Spaulding-Rigdon Connection. From 1824 to 1826, Sidney Rigdon was a journeyman printer at Patterson and Lambden Publishers in Pittsburgh. He had access to Spaulding's manuscript and discussed it with co-workers. Patterson, the publisher, died in 1826, and Manuscript Found passed into Sidney Rigdon's hands. Robert Patterson, son of the publisher, wrote an article titled, "Who Wrote the Book of Mormon?" He claimed that about 30 witnesses had said that the story about the Spaulding manuscript was true. The Rigdon-Smith collaboration, 1827 to 1830. Sidney Rigdon claimed he never met Joseph Smith until after Mormon missionaries presented him with the Book of Mormon and converted him to Smith's church. If these two men told the truth about their part in the creation of the Book of Mormon, it would not only destroy the restored church they both sought to create, but also their reputations as well. So they both told the story of an angel guiding Smith to golden plates that were engraved with the story of Christ's ministry in ancient America. And these golden engravings were translated by Smith from Reformed Egyptian to the first English edition of the Book of Mormon. But we have the following reasons to believe that a treasure seeker and a theologian collaborated to create the Book of Mormon themselves. Evidence of the secret Smith-Rigdon collaboration, 1827 to 1830. As we mentioned before, Rigdon had obtained the Spaulding manuscript from the Patterson and Lambden publishing firm in 1826, and the Book of Mormon was published in 1830. Therefore, if Rigdon did reshape Manuscript Found into the Book of Mormon, he definitely worked with Joseph Smith to publish it by 1830. There could be no other way. Here is strong evidence of that Rigdon-Smith collaboration. In 1831, just 1 year after the publication of the Book of Mormon, James Gordon Bennett Sr., the prominent founder, publisher, and editor of the New York Herald, began interviewing residents of Joseph Smith's Palmyra area. In an article of August 31st, 1831, he identifies Sidney Rigdon as the true author of the Book of Mormon. E.D. Howe's 1834 book, Mormonism Unveiled, added new evidence to bolster the Spalding-Rigdon theory. Sidney Rigdon revealed his collaboration with Smith when he told Adamson Bentley that he knew of a book coming out that had been engraved on golden plates. This was 2 years before the appearance of the Book of Mormon. In 1867, Pomeroy Tucker wrote Origin, Rise, and Progress of Mormonism. In this book, he says that Rigdon visited Smith in 1827. In December of 2008, Stanford University scholars Jockers, Witten, and Criddle conducted a computer analysis of the Book of Mormon. The result validated the Spalding-Rigdon theory of the origin of the Book of Mormon. The study found a strong Solomon Spalding signal in large parts of the book. It also found a strong Sidney Rigdon signal as a unifying force throughout the book, and a strong Oliver Cowdery signal in Alma, and a weaker Cowdery signal in the parts of the book that resemble Ethan Allen's view of the Hebrews. And finally, Walter Sidney Rigdon, grandson of Sidney, stated that the family knew that the Golden Bible was a hoax. Rigdon is the central figure in the founding of Mormonism. Joseph Smith's total dependence on Rigdon further affirms that he was the central person in the founding of the faith. First, after Rigdon's supposed conversion to Smith's church, Rigdon baptized hundreds of his Kirtland congregation into the Mormon faith. Smith then quickly moved his meager following in New York to Kirtland, the first real headquarters for the Mormon Church. Rigdon was given the title spokesman for the church, and he began to receive many revelations jointly with Smith. Rigdon replaced Oliver Cowdery as second in command. When the Mormon Articles of Faith were drawn up, they contained many things Rigdon had already been teaching to his Kirtland congregation. Rigdon worked on Smith's inspired version of the Bible. Sidney Rigdon was made president and chairman of the Kirtland Safety Society, a Mormon bank. In 1841, he was ordained, quote, prophet, seer, and revelator. Despite many intense power struggles and arguments between the two, when Smith announced his candidacy for the presidency of the United States in 1844, Rigdon was made his vice presidential running mate. Joseph Smith was thoroughly dependent upon Sidney Rigdon. The Smith-Rigdon-Cowdery story of the golden plates. A young boy named Joseph Smith went into the woods to pray to God about which church was correct. God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, appeared to him. They told him that none of the churches were true, and that he, Joseph Smith, would be instrumental in the restoration of the true church. An angel named Moroni then began appearing to Joseph Smith with instructions about golden plates hidden in the earth and how to retrieve them. According to the angel, the plates were engraved with the holy history of ancient America and a record of the risen Jesus Christ in America. According to Joseph Smith, he found the plates and translated them into what is called the Book of Mormon. He then showed the plates to witnesses of a nearby Whitmer family who were related to him, and Martin Harris, the man who financed the printing of the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith then worked with the Whitmer family to organize what he claimed to be Christ's true restored church. Smith then gave the golden plates back to the angel Moroni, and no one has ever seen them since. Joseph then sent missionaries out who contacted Sidney Rigdon, a well-established minister in Kirtland, Ohio. Rigdon read the Book of Mormon, converted to the Mormon faith, and baptized his large congregation into the new religion. Smith then moved his meager following in New York to Kirtland, Ohio, the new central headquarters of his church. Smith and Rigdon then had many revelations jointly, and Rigdon was at the side of Smith until Joseph's death. Sidney Rigdon was Joseph's designated equal in his theocratic station. Summary statement. A case for the Spalding-Rigdon theory of the origin of the Book of Mormon has been made. The record of the affidavits and signed statements about manuscript found have been covered. Some who claim to have seen the manuscript said the characters had the same names that appear in the Book of Mormon. But where is manuscript found today? The likely answer is that Smith, Rigdon, and Cowdery disposed of all copies permanently. Their official story is that the Book of Mormon is an ancient record translated from an ancient language that was engraved on golden plates. But where are the golden plates now? After showing them to his relatives and friends and translating from them, Smith said he gave them back to an angel. Those who try to live evidence-based lives today are saying that the Book of Mormon has failed many tests. Scientists have shown that the DNA of our native inhabitants is Asian and has no relationship to the Jews. Archaeologists haven't found any remnants of the battles described in the Book of Mormon. Geographers can't make maps based on the Book of Mormon narrative, and historians say that the book contains a lengthy list of anachronisms. But the faith-based people persist, and many of them live happy, productive lives as they look forward to their better world to come.